Good evening, and thank you for attending. My name is Natalie Sayre, and I will be the moderator for this evening's candidate debate. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor for this evening's event. The Clean Elections Act is a campaign finance reform measure initiated by Arizona citizens and passed by voters in 1998. Participation as a clean elections candidate is strictly voluntary. The system provides full funding for qualified candidates who agree to abide by the Clean Elections Act and rules. To qualify for funding, participating candidates must illustrate the support of their constituents by gathering $5 qualifying contributions from registered voters in their legislative district. The candidates agree to adhere to contribution and spending limits and may not accept money from special interest groups. They also agree to participate in these debates. As we move into the debate, we encourage audience questions. If you have questions, please print them clearly on the card given to you when you walked in and hold it up. One of our volunteers will pick up the cards and deliver them to me. We screen questions for clarity, to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. If you need another card, just raise your hand. The debate is scheduled for 1 hour, so we may not get to all of the audience questions, but we will do our best. There is an independent timer who will see that all candidates have equal time to answer questions and will tell them when their time is up. Our format this evening will be opening statements, 3 minutes, a quick lightning round, 2 minutes to answer general questions, 2 minutes to answer candidate to candidate questions, and closing statements will be 3 minutes. We ask that you remain polite to all of the candidates and give them a fair and uninterrupted hearing, no matter how strongly you may agree or disagree with anything being said. This means no applause, outbursts, or cheers, except now as we introduce our candidates. Dr. Randall Friese, candidate for representative of Legislative District 9 of the House, Democrat, and Mr. Ethan Orr. Mr. Ethan Orr, candidate for representative Arizona House District 9, Republican. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name and will progress from that starting point. The closing order will be determined by reverse alphabetical order by last name. Dr. Friese, will you please start your opening remarks?
Certainly. Thank you so much for this opportunity to meet the voters in our district. I'm a professor of surgery at the University of Arizona Medical Center. My wife and I moved here 6 years ago. We chose Tucson over several other metropolitan cities because we fell in love with the Southwest and Tucson and the U of A, and I thought it was an outstanding opportunity for my career. At that time, I didn't have any inclination that I would want to enter politics or join the legislature. I had an outstanding career. I was very pleased with where my career was going as a professor and researcher and teacher. And then a terrible event happened in January of 2011. We had a tragedy here in Tucson, and my involvement with that made me think more closely about broadening my community service. I've always felt that being a trauma surgeon is community service, and I thought that by joining the legislature I could broaden that experience and participate more widely in making decisions for my community. I paid close attention to what was happening in Phoenix. I was very enthralled and excited about the discussions and debates that were going on, and I was very excited about participating. I read the Capital Times very frequently. I think participating will be a great challenge and also a great reward. Very happy to move into Tucson. The most important thing in my mind that came to my platform when I entered this race was public education and supporting public education. I am a product of public education. I had a single parent, minimal opportunities. Without public education, I would not be a surgeon today. So I will fight very hard to protect that opportunity for our young people here in Arizona. And as everyone knows, Arizona is doing a very poor job at maintaining our system and fully supporting our system of public education. We must do much better, and we can do much better. Other issues that are important to me as a trauma surgeon, I see gun patients or people injured by gun violence on a daily basis. It's very important for me to participate in coming up with solutions for gun violence, and particularly putting forth responsible gun ownership legislation, so that we can make as much effort as we can to keep guns out of the hands of people who should not have them, criminals and mentally unstable individuals, while at the same time protecting our rights of law-abiding citizens. And this is something we can do. We can meet in the middle, but we must first talk to each other. We must first trust each other and bring that issue to a close by finding a solution. So that's why I'm running. Those are some issues that are important to me, and hopefully we'll get into that further this evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Orr.
Well, thank you. I appreciate everyone being here, and I appreciate my colleague as well. As many of you know, I'm a third-generation Arizonan. I grew up here, and I've been part of the fabric and the leadership and, frankly, the solutions of our community for several decades now. I had the opportunity, even as a Republican, to work for a Democratic City Council member. I brought the Empowerment Zone here, which brought about $500 million in tax credits into our city, even helped the city of South Tucson start a SWAT team and do some of the community-based policing. I also, my parents taught for TUSD, so I grew up the child of educators. My dad gave up a lucrative career because he was very proud to be an educator, and I've also taught for the University of Arizona for about 13 years now, and I just started teaching for NAU. Ultimately, what I have done for the past several decades is brought very diverse groups together and found reasonable, pragmatic, and effective solutions for our community. And that is what I've done these past 2 years. It's been a privilege and an honor to serve our community. That's what I've done at the legislature. I was able, for our veterans, I was able to create a training program that would fast-track them to the certifications they need to get employment. We actually, at Linkages, when I was the executive director, we helped a number of veterans with disabilities find meaningful employment. I worked with a group called Missing in Action program, and we identified every cremated remains of a veteran, and I changed the liability laws so that on our dime, we gave each and every one of them, we're finding them a way to get them an honorable burial because they served our community. I work very closely with Republicans and Democrats to pass a commercial spaceflight bill, which has already saved or generated 200 jobs through Paragon Space Systems here in Tucson. I was able to prevent the funding cuts, and hopefully we'll get more into that, to our libraries. We were actually, the county, because of a secondary property tax issue, was going to shut down about a third of our libraries. I built a coalition of conservative city managers from eastern Arizona and stopped that bill. I did a number to protect the Greyhounds. I also was able to increase our funding for the University of Arizona, for the JTED, the Joint Technological Education District, Pima College, mental health first aid, and public safety, school resource officers. Ultimately, when I think about the Arizona that we want to be, I think about the icons, Isabella Greenway, Carl Hayden, Mo Udall, Barry Goldwater, people who had a sense of place leadership, and that a sense of place leadership for our community was able to rise above partisan politics. Even if they disagreed on one issue or two issues, instead of creating divisive wedge issues, they said, what's best for our community? And they sought continually what was best for Arizona. More than anything, I want to bring back that sense of community and purpose and vision and create the Arizona that we want at the Capitol.
Thank you. In an attempt to lighten the mood for our tonight's debate, we are going to do a quick lightning round of this or that. This will allow us to get to know more about the candidates. Please answer with just one word. Dr. Friese.
You know we're politicians, right?
Yes, I do. Dr. Friese, Droid, iPhone or Windows?
iPhone.
iPhone.
All right. Mr. Orr, Facebook or Twitter?
Facebook.
Dr. Friese?
Facebook.
All right. And finally, Mac or PC, Dr. Friese?
PC.
Mac.
All right. Thank you so much. Now let's move into our debate questions. So the first question is, how will you differentiate yourself from the current legislation that is to improve the lives of Arizona citizens? Dr. Friese, we will start with you.
Well, I think that's the purpose of a state legislature, is to ensure that we're working toward the common goal of improving the lives of its citizens. And the most important, in my mind, the most important thing a state government can do is to ensure a sound, well-funded, and excellent system of public education, because public education equalizes opportunities across socioeconomic status. So public education provides opportunity to people who may not have as much opportunity to start with. Public education improves not only, I like to say public education, unlike economics, will trickle down. And it will improve your life, it will improve your children's lives, and it will improve your children's children's lives. So this is a very important thing, and in my mind, the most important responsibility of a state government is to ensure access to and support of a system of public education.
Thank you.
Well, I certainly agree with that, and I think that's the reason that I've actually received the endorsement of our teachers. The Arizona Education Association, I've received numerous legislative awards from the Save Our Schools, a public education advocacy group, ABEC, Arizona Business Education Council, and the Joint Technological Education District. The reason for that is we need to move beyond the rhetoric into the specifics. We already fund 46% of our state budget to K-12 education. I worked very hard 2 years ago to get $80 million more, and again to get $80 million more, and then $40 million with the Governor's Student Success Program just for K-12 education. I want to talk also about higher ed later on. But one of the things that was so important, if you look at Mo Udall, his effectiveness was in the details, and he really was an icon here in the community. And so what I did is I brought our superintendents, because back in October, I knew this would go all the way to the finish line with the governor, and I had the superintendents of Amphi and Flowing Wells sit down and write the bill, because not only is it about funding public education, it's about making sure that we don't hurt less affluent students for simply being less affluent. We've all seen the data that basically there's an inverse correlation between free and reduced lunches and student success. And so I literally brought our superintendent, our inner city school superintendents, to the table where we drafted the bill, and we made sure that we didn't hurt poor students for being poor, and we opened up those doors of opportunity. I also did that again with the Joint Technological Education District. They have a 98% graduation rate because, frankly, some of the way we do education doesn't work for all the students. Some students are tactile learners, and they need to get their hands on. And so we can put them in a mechanic or an auto shop program, and they can thrive and do well. So we need to create multiple career paths. One, using the old 2+2 program for those that want to be college-bound. And the other thing that I'll do, if I go back as the chairman of the Higher Education and Workforce Committee, is work to create a statewide financial aid system so that everyone has not only access to a rigorous public education, but financial wherewithal to go to higher education. But for those that are not college-bound, we need to create opportunities for them as well.
Thank you. So to ensure that both of you have equal time, please allow me to prompt you for the question. Okay? So our next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Orr. And what issue is unique to the District 9, and how will you address it?
Well, I think one of the things that's unique to District 9 is the sense of pragmatism. If you look at our district, it's actually a district that wants to see solutions created. And as I've gone door to door, people really want jobs. One of the things that's so important, I believe workforce development, as I mentioned, is a way of recruiting businesses. But I have literally been at the table negotiating to bring businesses here. When I was in the Office of Economic Development. When I ran linkages, we helped 855 people find meaningful employment. And everyone in this district wants to have a job because a job is purpose. Whether you're developmentally disabled or you're a PhD, you need to contribute to society. And the sense that I get from our district is they want to be able to do that, and they want to have a caring, giving way about them. The other thing that's very important in our district, and we managed to put $30 million more through the HERF Fund, is transportation and roads. I mean, some of us took Grant down here, and frankly, Grant is scary. So we need to look at working with some of our council members in the RTA and shifting those bonding programs up a little bit forward. But we were able to get $30 million more into the HERF funds, into our transportation. I think we need to restore the full 120, and I will continue to work to do that, and get better roads in our district.
Thank you. Dr. Friese.
Well, I'll be quite frank. The issue that is unique to this district is, of course, guns. Our district is the one in which there was a mass shooting. I see, as I mentioned earlier, I see gun violence daily. We must begin to get together. We must begin to talk to one another respectfully, and we must begin to negotiate and find a solution to the gun violence problem in our state, in our district, in our state, in our country. And not only are Arizonans ready for it, but the majority of Americans are ready for it. We can't continue to turn our backs on one another and refuse to talk about and recognize the opinions and the concerns for safety amongst a large part of our population. So one of the things that I do well is work together on a team. I lead a team in the ICU, I care for patients, I take information from many different sources, and as a team we come up with solutions and decisions. So I'd like to go to the legislature and build a team. When you build a team, you must start out with trust and respect. Those things must be built, they take time. So, you know, we have to make small deals first, but we have to respect each other, we have to talk to one another, we have to listen to one another so we can find a solution to this very large problem.
Thank you. Dr. Friese, we'll start with you on where do you stand on Governor Brewer's Medicaid expansion?
In fact, I'm very grateful you asked that question. I don't know if it came from Elections or one of you, but that is the issue that one of the issues that drew my attention to running for office. I paid very close attention to the debates that the legislature had on this very important issue. And I very absolutely would have sided on the side of voting for Medicaid expansion. In 2010, Medicaid was contracted and access was contracted in this state. People fell off the rolls. We had increased numbers of patients with unreimbursed health care. Now that access has been expanded, Medicaid has been expanded, we're seeing some of those numbers go in the other direction. That was an outstanding vote and an outstanding decision for our state. Unfortunately, in this session, a vote was taken to limit Medicaid to 5 years, which would have had exactly the opposite effect on access and contracted the rolls. That I didn't understand. That, in fact, passed the House. It passed the Senate, but gratefully, the governor vetoed that bill. I actually wrote an op-ed in the paper and thanked her for her veto of that bill, that very, very devastating bill. So I would easily have voted to support for Medicaid expansion. Health care is an important right and important service that our state government must provide to its citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Orr.
Well, I certainly appreciate your praise for my vote for Medicaid expansion. You know, that vote actually in many ways was an epiphany for me. I faced incredible opposition, as many of you know, for taking that stance, and it created an epiphany. I remember walking around the Capitol Hall, and I had people from all sides within my party and supporters of mine even threatening to end my political career, and I genuinely, at the time that I took that vote, thought that my career was over. And my epiphany was that for good policy, even though I didn't run on Medicaid, it was put in my lap, for what I believed to be good policy, would I sacrifice my political career? And I thought at the time I would be unelectable and probably continue to be unelectable because the issue within my party, as some of you know, is so toxic. And that epiphany has set me free to stand up for what I believe is right time and time and time again. Because I said, I will always choose good policy. We may not agree on the policy, but I will always choose what I believe to be good policy over politics, and that Medicaid vote freed me to do that. Now, many of you know the logic that I used to do that. It made sense. It brought $1.5 billion into our state, saved about 20,000 jobs, kept some of our hospitals from going into receivership. I work very closely with people with mental illness, and it gave them access to treatment so that they don't end up in our criminal justice system. And so it was a good vote, and I was proud to have taken that vote, and I was proud to have stood up in the face of great opposition to take that vote and to do what I believe to be the right policy decision for our state over politics, one way or another.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Orr. What are 2 or 3 issues most important to improving education at a K-12 level?
Well, I think one of the first things that we need to do is look at the way that we do our reimbursement for dual enrollment. As I mentioned, back in the 80s, we had what was called a 2+2+2 system, where if my dad ended his career teaching at Cholla. If I'm a student at Cholla, or where I went, Amphi, first-generation college student, if I do dual enrollment my junior and senior year and I actually get 12 units, I'm statistically more likely to go to Pima Community College and get my associate's degree. And if once I complete my associates, and believe it or not, ASU is ahead of us, and I'd like to work with the U of A and Pima College to create a very effective pathway, if I get my associates, say, in the mechanical arts, I'm halfway to a systems engineering degree. So that is very important. More than anything else, and this is working when I was at the city of South Tucson, working with Barrio Libre and changing those kids' hearts hearts and minds and directing them towards education, more than anything else, we've got to give them hope. And hope comes with a well-funded scholarship to a higher education institution. It comes with a path to a higher education institution. And then, as I've mentioned for the Pima County JTED, well-funded alternatives to higher education for those that want to go into career technical education. And that would include auto mechanics, police, and fire. One of the things that I got the first funding since 2008, $1.5 million for our Pima County JTED. I was one of the groups that actually, one of the people that supported its creation in 2006. I worked very closely with our business community. That $1.5 million, I believe, is just a down payment and investment into a very good program. If I go back, and hopefully when I go back, I will be able to get them another 1.5 as the chairman of higher education, but I also want to get 9th grade funding reinstated. They cut that in 2008, that was before my time, but once we can get 9th grade education, we can transition more kids that want to work with their hands in career technical education into that vocation.
Thank you. Dr. Friese.
Well, I just want to take 10 seconds, and since Ethan pointed out that I did give him praise for his last vote, I'd also like to point out that I was not only confused, but very disappointed when he voted to limit access in Medicaid to 5 years. I found that very confusing and disparate. Moving on to the education question, the most important thing that we can do in our state is, of course, fund our schools. Our teachers need to be funded appropriately. They need to be reimbursed appropriately. Our teachers are leaving our state to other states because we cannot pay them the salaries that they require. We aren't giving them what they need to instruct the students in the classrooms. And you know, everyone's aware of the Proposition 301 issue that's facing our state right now. You know, over several years, the legislature that is currently in place has ignored the base level increase to account for inflation that was due to our public school system. We now must begin to pay back those monies, those reset and back payments. Next year, we need to pay back $317 million. On day one, I will vote to pay that money back when I'm sent to the legislature. We need to pay what's owed and what the voters asked for in 2000 when they passed Proposition 301. The current legislature is no friend to public education. I think we need to point that out. There were 4 votes to expand empowerment scholarships accounts. There were 3 votes to increase corporate tax credits for donations to STOs. 2 of those bills were so bad they were vetoed by Governor Brewer. So I think the most important thing we can do for education is support it, fund it like we mean it. Let's get down to business and fix this problem.
Thank you. Next question, Dr. Friese. Please say specifically how you would vote on access to abortions, birth control, and sex education.
That is very simple. I support a woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions. I support anatomically and physiologically correct sex education in our schools. It will reduce abortion rates and prevent unplanned pregnancy. Was there a third part to that question?
Birth control, sex education, and abortions.
And I absolutely support easy access to birth control to all working women.
Thank you. Mr. Orr.
Well, I think if you look at abortion, most of it's settled law, and I think the debate's wrong. We've created a very divisive conversation of pro-life, pro-choice. One of the first things I did when I got up there 2 years ago is, surprisingly for a Republican, is I called Planned Parenthood. And I worked with some of my Democratic colleagues, and I said, no one wants there to be more abortions. And I don't actually, for personal reasons, support abortion, but that is settled law. There were only 2 abortion votes in the entire session, and I actually sided with Planned Parenthood with one and disagreed with them in the other. But all of us, every single person in this state wants to see the number of abortions go down. And I think the way that you start is with medically accurate sex education in the high schools. And then you need to look at how are you going to support women who are in a desperate and vulnerable situation, some of you. You need to increase WIC funding. You need to increase prenatal care. And you need to take care of them as they take care of that child. And that's the most important thing you can do in terms of it. Now, if you look at the abortion debate, we're actually, I believe, sometimes harming the very people we want to help because we're not focusing on what we share in common, which is we want to make sure that people are protected and we want to make sure that they're safe and they have the supports they need. When Gosnell happened a year ago, and that was an atrocious situation, I knew that there would be a piece of legislation. I actually approached some of my Democratic colleagues and again some folks at Planned Parenthood. I said, let's work together and get ahead of this issue. Let's actually create a compromise and a solution to the issue. And they didn't want to. And I don't blame them. It's politically difficult to do. But the reality is we have got to move beyond the rhetoric into the realm of solutions. We have got to help and protect the very lives that we're talking about.
Thank you. Mr. Orr, how will you work with the rest of the House to find solutions to some of these issues?
Well, I think more than anyone, I'm very, very effective at that. Almost every one of my major pieces of legislation, from the laser bill I did to help our police, to commercial space flight, to the JTED, I actually purposely reached out to bicycle safety to a Democratic colleague, because when I say I want an Arizona that works together towards commonality and solutions, I mean it. And I have done that repeatedly. I brought my colleagues in. In fact, I believe the best way to create legislation, and this is where I want to go back to, is where we take a problem, whatever that problem would be, and we sit down and we get around the table and we all solve it together. Because it is very hyperpartisan up there. I personally passed more bills than the entire minority caucus combined. And I frankly think that's unacceptable, that you have 40% of the votes passing 0% of the bills. And so I want to do more to bring the minority party into the table, and I have done that. In fact, the committee that I'm slated to chair, Higher Education and Workforce, if I were to return, I've already reached out to the minority member, and this has not been done in our state for over 15 years, but I've reached out to the potential ranking member, and I said, here's what I want to do, you and me. We sit down, chair, vice chair, ranking member, Democrat staff, Republican staff, and we set the agenda together. That has not been done. That's the way our state used to be. And that's the way I believe our state will be again. And so I've already reached out to the other side. I've already reached out to people who have different opinions, because I believe the very best legislation comes from a Ronald Reagan working with a Tip O'Neill and having very disparate and very different opinions shaping the same solution.
Thank you. Dr. Friese.
Again, I'd just like to take 10 seconds to point out something that Mr. Orr failed to mention. When he first entered the legislature 2 years ago, he also signed a proclamation declaring Roe versus Wade unconstitutional, and promised that he would do everything to obtain rights of personhood for the fetus. Moving on to how I would establish a working relationship at the House, I think that's absolutely pertinent that you work together as a group. As I mentioned before, I'm a team leader in the hospital, and I will take those skills and continue to be a team leader at whatever job I continue to have the luxury of having. Building a team leader is a unique skill set. You have to have the motivation to do it. You have to have the ability to allow someone else to succeed. You have to be able to share your successes. You have to be a credit giver, not a credit taker. All these are skills that I have developed over the years as both a professor of medicine and a team leader in the ICU. Yes, it will take time to establish these relationships in Phoenix. These things are important, and investing time reaps many rewards. So developing these trusting, respectful relationships, I'm going to spend a lot of time in the first session doing that, absolutely. But it's required, and I will have success because I've done it before. One of the most genuine comments I've ever received from one of my residents was, Dr. Friese, you make people feel comfortable. So my residents are learning how to make decisions, and I make them feel comfortable taking on that responsibility. So I'm hopeful I can take these skills to the Capitol and work together with my fellow legislators in the future.
Thank you. Next question. Arizona's unemployment rate has remained around 7% this year and has been slow to recover from the Great Recession. Dr. Friese, what do you propose to improve the climate of jobs in our state?
Everything comes back to the economy, and I think that we have to start with education. People that get a great education will want to stay in Arizona. If we have a system of excellent public education, people will want to move to Arizona. If and when we have a system of great public education, businesses and corporations will want to move to Arizona. I think we have to start with the basics, infrastructure. And in my mind, education and providing an excellent system of public education is infrastructure that Arizona must commit to. Other things that we need to commit to improve our economy: innovation, technology, and again, other pieces of infrastructure, roads, water, those types of things need to be supported so that we can grow. Where people want to live is where corporations and businesses will want to build and grow. So we must address our infrastructure problems. We must address our social issues problems. We have a bad reputation. So in order to get people to move here, we have to address these problems with their reputation. We must move forward with equality for all. We must stop being prejudiced. We must come to grips with the fact that a woman has a right to make her own health care decisions. If we correct these problems, infrastructure, education, social issues, our economy will improve.
Thank you. Mr. Orr?
Well, I've had the opportunity to serve as the Director of Economic Development for the City of South Tucson and as an Economic Development Manager for the City of Tucson. So I've actually been in the room where we're bringing companies to this town, and I know what it takes to bring them here. I'll start with infrastructure and trade. One of the things that's very important to me is building a close relationship through supply chain and infrastructure development with our neighbor to the south. They're our largest trading partner, and I was actually down in Mexico City with the speaker a couple months ago negotiating that. Now, one of the things that's so important, and I've been pushing for this, is we need to take I-11, the new corridor paralleled with I-19, and extend that north-south all the way down into Mexico City. Because if you take that route, it goes through every major industrial hub of Mexico. And this is why we had the Gadsden Purchase. This actually brings the flow of goods up here. The reason that's so important isn't just the flow of goods. We need the intermodal transportation. That's where we take the truck to the train and the train to the truck. It'll create about 100, 150 jobs. That's not much, but it lowers my transportation and logistics costs, which combined with cost affordable energy allows me to recruit a plant like Tesla. It gives us a competitive advantage. But a scary conversation I had with the federal senators down in Mexico, because we have not invested in our infrastructure, and Texas has, they are actively poaching our produce companies, and they want to go east-west. So we have to get on top of that. We have to work. I sat down with actually the U.S. ambassador to Mexico, and we're currently working on trying to realign that trade route. Another thing that's so very important is the tax climate. I helped work to pass the research and development tax credit to help bring more companies, and then obviously workforce. One of the things that was kind of an epiphany for me, I helped recruit the Slim Fast. It was a $100 million facility, oh golly, over a decade ago, and they had over 100 jobs that we could not fill because they needed machinists and mechanics. It's one of the reasons I helped start the JTED. We could not fill those positions. It was embarrassing, and the company ultimately left. If you look at every city that is who we want to be, Boston and biotech, Palo Alto and Silicon Valley, it is a strong economy anchored by a well-funded public institution.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we have received a request from the audience. If we could please slow down in our speech so that they might capture all the information. And also, a few of us have hearing issues, so if we'd please be mindful of that. So, Mr. Orr, what changes, if any, do you think should be made to Arizona gun laws?
Well, I will slow down. I will talk with some of the ones that we actually made last session. One of the bills, 2333, that I helped pass through the floor, actually expanded the prohibited possessor to include mental illness, and it also made the Nixus database fast-track the information getting there. We need to make sure that our databases are working more closely together and that people have access to it. We also need to look at the broader perspective. One of the reasons that I supported mental health first aid is you look at that awful incident that affected so many of our friends and colleagues, and Mr. Loeffner frankly needed the treatment, and we needed to find a way to get him the treatment that he needed before he even got his hands on a firearm. That's why the prohibited possessor. That's why I supported the mental health, and actually it was my bill, and I got the funding when we negotiated with the governor to start that program. But then the other thing that we did, and I worked with Representative Kavanaugh to do this, we changed the judicial hold, because before we passed this bill this year, if a teacher or a trusted colleague observed behavior and a police officer didn't come in and observe that same behavior, they couldn't take that person's word for it. And so unless they directly observe it, they couldn't put on a judicial hold for mental health. We changed that law this past year, and we actually worked with our own sheriff, Sheriff Dupnick, to do this, to make sure that if that trusted person says this, the police officer can take their word on it. Another thing that's so very important, we need to make sure that people not only feel safe, but actually are safe. That's why I increased funding for school resource officers. In fact, I'm working right right now to get $300,000 for community-based policing. Last year I went through the budget line by line and found a fund that I could direct towards our community. And so that's going to be $300,000 towards community-based policing. And another thing that's so very important, when I was at the City of South Tucson, we learned about geo-based policing. If you target crime in a certain area, that's how you reduce it. It's highly localized. If you target that, now this is all evidence-based criminal justice policies that are so very important to follow.
Thank you. Dr. Friese.
Well, as I mentioned in my introduction, responsible gun ownership legislation is paramount in my campaign and in my efforts when I joined the legislature. What Ethan failed to mention were three really kind of despicable pieces of legislation that were passed by the House this past term. One, basically saying that municipalities cannot override state regulations on gun ownership. It also, in the same piece of legislation, put at risk political office holders. They can be sued, held personally accountable, and they could even be terminated. I'm not quite sure how one terminates an elected official, but that piece of legislation was passed by the House and then vetoed by the governor. There's also a bill that was passed this legislative period. I call it the Guns Everywhere bill, but most people call it Guns in Public Places, which mandated that if you're in a public building and you didn't want guns inside your building for your event, you needed to hire a security officer or put up a metal detector at the door to prevent the gun from coming in. Again, that bill was vetoed by the governor. And then last session there was a bill about police buybacks, and if I turned my gun into the police, I would hope that it was going to be destroyed. A bill was passed last year that the police cannot destroy that weapon, they must resell it and put it back into the pool. I think that those pieces of legislation were bad for Arizona, bad for our district, and bad for our country. I will stand up to the NRA.
Thank you. So Dr. Friese, we'll start with you on this one. What are your thoughts about Common Core homeschooling and charter schools?
Okay, well, I'll take Common Core first. Certainly a hot issue this election cycle, particularly in the superintendent of public instruction race. I think it's become a very defining issue. I think that Common Core is something that we've invested time and money in. I think that we need to give it a chance and put it into place. I recently toured several elementary schools in the Flowing Wells and TUSD districts, talked to the teachers about Common Core and how comfortable they felt with it. The purpose of Common Core is to be sure that our students in K through 12 are getting similar curriculum throughout the state. We need to be sure that students in Pima County in 9th grade are getting a similar curriculum as in Maricopa County, et cetera. So that's the purpose of Common Core, and I think people misunderstand that Common Core does not dictate curriculum day to day in the classroom. The teachers and principals I spoke to about Common Core were very comfortable with it. It was a different way for them to teach, but they've adapted. I think it is meaningful in teaching language arts, math, and literacy to our young people, and also teaching them how to think critically, starting at an early age. We all know how important learning is in the early years. So getting that introduction to critical thinking early can only benefit our students.
Thank you, Mr. Orr.
Well, one of the things, and it was very revealing. After I got elected, I was actually celebrating with a good friend of mine that was a 5th grade teacher, and I was telling her all the exciting things that we were going to do from the legislative standpoint. And she'd been a friend of mine for over 20 years, and she broke down crying. And she basically said, please don't. Please just don't do anything else to us. And I think the problem that we have with the current Common Core debate, it was enacted by the school board in 2010. Now, for whatever reason, and what we tend to do with our educational policy is we hold it up and we go with the flavor of the week. And we don't understand the impact that it has on our schools and our teachers. To shift to say Common Core, up, not Common Core, something else, will throw our entire educational institution in chaos. You cannot do those to our teachers. A book that actually really informed and was the reason I stopped the ESA bill based on geographic expansion. And I stood up to the Federation of Children, which is an organization that promotes that, is I sat down and I read Reign of Error. And one thing that's very important to me, not only in our education policy, but in all of our policies, is to have an evidence-based system. And so, and I don't like to answer questions previously, but I do want to touch on the criminal justice laws. Every criminal justice policy and vote that I took was based on academic research. If you want to look at it, the University of Columbia put out a meta-study on criminal justice from 1983 to 2012. It was a combination of 27 different studies. Everything that I did up there was evidence-based. If you can show me the evidence, I will base my legislation on that. And if you look at Common Core, that's the one thing that we've got to do. It is a standards choice. Much of the angst comes from curriculum choices that have nothing to do with the standards. And frankly, any transition needs to be orderly, and it needs to involve our teachers, because we cannot continue to change the standards and change the way teachers are required to teach.
Thank you. Mr. Orr, next question. What do you think of Arizona's current image, and what, if anything, would you do to change it?
Our image needs a lot of work, and I think I have changed it, and I'm assuming I'll get some questions on 1062, and I hope I can tell that whole story. But I was one of the people that stood up against 1062 in the face of tremendous pressure from donors, my party leadership, and I said, based on principle, I will not vote for this. I will not allow it in my committee. And I was actually in the room where we talked to the governor, and she decided to veto it. These types of bills are not what we were sent up there to do. We were sent up there to create pragmatic solutions. And so I think those are the types of things that we need to do to improve our state's image. The other thing that's very important is with Mexico, and it's the little things. I got a call a couple, and one thing that I will say, the other thing that we don't need to do is wring our hands about our image. We need to get in there and solve the problem. So I got a call about a month ago in the liquor omnibus bill. Unbeknownst to anyone, we actually created a problem where if I'm a Mexican national, my ID is no longer valid to purchase alcohol. This is not really well known. But what I did, as opposed to tweeting and wringing my hands about it, is I called the Liquor Control Board, and I got ahead of the issue, and I said, how do we fix this? And so we're already putting administrative and then next year legislative changes to fix that, because the last thing we need is another black eye with our neighbor to the south. These are the types of things that practically we can get ahead of ourselves. It's also very important to continue. As I said, I was part of the trade delegation to Mexico City. It's very important through our universities and legislator to legislature to create those relationships and show them that we are practical, pragmatic, and that we are open for business.
Thank you, Dr. Friese.
Well, I briefly mentioned this issue before, our bad reputation. We certainly need to clean things up when it comes to guns, immigration, equality, and prejudice in our state. Clearly, when Mr. Orr took his vote on 1062, I was surprised. He represents me, and I had no idea that he was going to vote that way. My job is to tell you on big issues like this, you will know how I will vote. When he made his vote, it was a simple vote on the floor. I didn't hear him speak out against it. He did not explain why he voted the way he did. I wanted to hear him tell me his values on this issue. And one thing he didn't mention is in 2013, he sits on the Judiciary Committee. In 2013, there was an exact same bill. It came to his committee. He voted yes, sent it to the floor. The governor vetoed that bill because it was when she was doing her Medicaid bargainings, and she told the legislature, you send me anything but my budget, I will veto it. They sent her this bill. It was vetoed. So he changed his mind on this issue, I think, but I would really like to have heard a little bit more about why you voted that way. But yes, we have a serious problem with the reputation. We have a lot of work to do, but we can do this work together. We can do this work by talking to each other and listening to each other.
Thank you. Dr. Friese. What will you do to help fund adult education in Arizona?
Well, certainly we've spoken a lot about public education, K through 12, but public education also includes adult education, post-secondary education, community college, vocational schools, JTEDs, and our university system. So these systems need to be supported, absolutely. The university constantly is asking for increases in its budgets. It hasn't gotten them. Tuition in the University of Arizona has gone up by 33% since 2008. This is not sustainable. We have to very critically look at the budgets that the universities are asking for and give them the support they need so that our students that are relying on our state schools to get the education that helps to improve their lives can afford it. I spoke to a young girl when I was on the U of A campus. She stopped me because we were doing a political event. And she stopped me and she said, "I want to tell you my story. I am here on a 4-year scholarship." She was in her second year. She was finishing her second year. And she said to me, "Tuition's going up and they won't cover it with my scholarship." She now had to pay out of pocket that increase in her tuition. That should not happen when someone's on a scholarship. So there's a lot of things we need to look at. There's a lot of things we need to change. We can fund these systems because they are so important. We need to spend more efficiently. We need to spend more effectively. But these are things that we can attack and solve as a group.
Thank you. Mr. Orr.
Well, I see one of my good friends from adult education here. Last year, I helped increase their funding by $4.5 million. Had I not been in the legislature, in the majority party, at the budget negotiation table, I don't think we would have gotten that. That meant a lot of opportunity for a lot of people here in Pima County. It's one thing to say something, it's quite another to do it and to continue to do it. So that $4.5 million meant a lot to our community. I supported Literacy Connects, particularly when the 5 separate agencies, some of you may remember this as 3-4 years ago, merged into one. I helped support that because it's so important that we create literacy programs and that we unify our resources in teaching that, because truly, if you can read, it opens up the door to everything else. One thing that I will say very briefly on the 1062, my colleague asked how I came to that conclusion. In 2013, when a similar bill was passed, I not only went through it for several hours, I went through it with an attorney, and then I called the ACLU, and I went through it with them, and then I called Center for Arizona Policy, and I went through it with them, line by line. And they assured me that they would be able to make some changes after the Judiciary Committee, which is why I allowed it to go through that last year, or in 2013. They did not make those changes, and I was the one Republican that voted against it on the floor last year. This year, I fundamentally refused to allow it to go through the Judiciary Committee. Now, there are almost no one stands up to their party, and I've done it repeatedly. I went to the Speaker of the House, I went to the Chairman of the Judiciary, and I say, I will not allow this bill to be here, and I was under immense pressure from every conservative in the state for over a month to do that. That's why, if you look at it, they withdrew it from Judiciary because of me and had to take it up through government. And then I was one of 3 Republicans that stood up against that vote and continued to fight it on the floor. And then when it went to the governor's desk, I was one of 6 people sitting with the governor when she made that fateful decision to veto it. In fact, I brought some letters from businesses here and personally handed them to the governor.
Thank you. At this point in time, each of the candidates will have the opportunity to ask one question of their opponent. Please briefly state your question, and we will start with you, Mr. Orr.
Okay. Well, I was actually preparing for the debate today, and I got a call from a high-ranking elected Democratic leader in this region, and so this question actually comes from them. Given the fact that most members of the minority party are not part of the budget negotiations, have not gotten a single bill passed, and that I was able to, like I said, pass more bills than the entire minority caucus combined, how do you propose getting any of the ideas that you have talked about tonight to the governor's desk and enacted in legislation?
Well, I think that reflects back to the things I've been saying all evening long. We must work as a team. We must build respect. We must build trust. And in order to effectively negotiate, you have to have that infrastructure. And it's going to take time to build that infrastructure. I've got experience with that. I am a smart person. I communicate well. And most importantly, I listen well. And that's something, that's a skill I've learned as being a physician, to listen to my patients. So, and really, half of communication is listening. So we have to listen to each other. And those are things I would do. You can't start out by accepting defeat. I'm not going to go to the legislature saying I'm in the minority party. I'm not going to have any participation in these processes. No, I actually will have participation in these processes. I will talk to people on the side. I will meet with people who are willing to listen and share ideas. So yes, I think I can be effective. In fact, I'm certain I will be effective. Maybe not as effective as I'd like to be. And will that be problematic for me? I'll have to swallow my pride and say, and continue to do the best I can do, and work hard, and work on my communication and my trust and my respect. But that's how I will attack this problem, and I will be effective.
Thank you. And Dr. Friese, your question for Mr. Orr.
This is, I think, a very direct question, and hopefully you can give us a simple answer. But again, I don't want to harp on the 1062 issue, but it is an equality question. Would, across the country, gay marriage bans are falling. I refuse to allow Arizona to be the last state to shed its prejudice. Would you join with me to allow two same-sex people who love each other to marry?
Yes, I actually would. In fact, one of the things that is so very important to me, and this is Jim Colby and I, who's a friend and a supporter of mine, had a good conversation about this. The way that I view marriage from a deeply held religious belief standpoint is I am asking you, I've been married to my wife happily for 13 years. We have 3 kids. And it is my deeply held religious belief that she is the right one for me, and I hope that I will be married to her for the rest of my life. If I am asking you to acknowledge and ratify my deeply held religious belief that that is correct, then I believe on a moral standpoint, I have to turn around and acknowledge and respect your deeply held religious belief. Now, when we start talking, and one of the classes I teach, so I get a little esoteric, is Civil Liberties and Constitutional Law at the university. I've taught it for years. I believe that the government is actually recognizes contractual obligations. And so, one, on a moral standpoint, I need to respect your deeply held religious belief, even if it is not the same as mine, because we live in a constitutional republic. But I also believe that the government has an obligation to recognize that contractual relationship, which is ultimately what it is, and that the government should never be in the business of limiting people's right to contract through marriage or through entering into a business or in any other way, shape, or form. The government should not limit people's ability and right to contract and respect each other.
Thank you. At this point in time, we will begin candidate closing statements. The first closing statement will be given by Mr. Orr.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate everyone that's taken the time to be here for, I think, a very lovely debate. I respect my colleague, I respect his mind, and I respect all of you. I will say it has been a privilege to serve my community, and whether or not I'm elected, whether I have 2 months left, 2 years, or 20 years, I will continue to serve our community. I've been an integral part of the leadership and the fabric and the solutions that we have created together as a community, and the solutions are uniquely Tucson. I have been at the table time and time again when we made the decisions, even some of the successes and failures we had with Rio Nuevo, the streetcar, some of these other things. I've been at the table, I have the institutional knowledge and the memory, and I've taken that with me. It is a distinct honor to represent the district that I grew up in, to represent the people that raised me, and do everything I possibly can to make this community a better place. And I mentioned in my open statement, when I think of the Arizona we want to be, it is an Arizona that rises above partisan bickering and partisan politics. When we think about the people that made this state great, again, the Carl Haydens who built the Center for the CAP project, when we think about them, they had their ideological beliefs, but they always supported each other. Jim Colby told me this. When Mo Udall, who I respect, I grew up watching him, when Mo Udall was on his deathbed, Barry Goldwater came and visited him every single day. That is the Arizona we want to be. They were far apart on ideological differences, but the difference is they were friends, and they came to a point where we can disagree here, but we can go and we can have coffee and a beer afterwards, and we can find a point of agreement. We will never, ever move this state forward when we're willing to sacrifice bipartisanship and commonality for partisan difference. As long as we continue to talk about divisive wedge issues and not put our state first, we will always be in the same situation. The truth is, 80% of the goals we have in common. And I look at Susana Martinez, what she was able to do as governor of New Mexico. That's who I want to be. I want to identify the issues that we support each other on, have in common, and move our state forward. Everyone wants there to be less abortions. Everyone wants there to be more jobs. Everyone wants to make sure that every child in Arizona has a well-funded, world-class education and the opportunity to stay in this state because we've created an economic environment where there are jobs. Let's focus on that. If you look at the bills that I supported, my commercial spaceflight, JTED, police safety, supporting veterans' education and burial rights, every single one of my bills passed, even on the controversial issues like supporting some changes to the medical marijuana law, the most controversial issues in the state. Every single one of my bills left the House with over 50 out of 60 votes because I made sure that everyone was at the table, and whether I needed them or not, that their voice was heard.
Thank you. Dr. Friese, your 3-minute closing statement.
Well, I'd like to thank the Clean Elections Commission as well as everyone here tonight for taking time out this evening. I'd also like to thank Ethan for his participation in this debate. It's great to share our views. In closing, I'd like to say it's time for change in Arizona. Arizona has been moving backward for far too long. I am passionate about participating in this process. I'll take that passion to the Capitol and work with you, or work for you with that passion. I think passion is a very important part, and dedication to a cause is a very important part to be an effective leader. I also can bring unique talent and expertise to the Capitol, and I'd like to be able to participate in some of the decisions that are being made about healthcare. I also want to be very specific, and I'm going to leave you with a few things that I want to do in the legislature. I will reverse legislation that systematically defunds public education. I will defend a woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions. I will ensure that we have communities safe from meaningless gun violence. I will stand for equality for all and work to stop the politics of fear and the politics of hate. I will work to reverse the economic hardships faced by many Arizonan families by supporting our business community, by working with our neighbor Mexico to enhance trade opportunities, and by properly funding our university's efforts in research and development. We need Arizona leaders to stop fighting and to work together to move Arizona forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We thank you both so much for participating in our forum this evening. And to all of you who came out this evening, we thank you for your time, the time you took to inform yourselves before voting. We encourage you to find out more about clean elections and the candidates running for office by visiting www.azcleanelections.gov. A video of this debate, as well as other clean elections debates, will be posted on that site within 72 hours of a scheduled debate. Thank you all for coming this evening.